May 4th, 2007 became the date that defined Greensburg, Kansas, when the most powerful tornado classification struck the farming town of 1,400 people.
Thing is right on top of Greensburg. Your time is up. You need to be in your shelter right now.
Everything started falling on top of us.
As I was turning around, the roof started ripping up.
I literally got blown off the road into the ditch.
Tasha Hoover stared at the radar display, watching the massive red blob crawl northeast across the screen. She'd gotten home at 6 p.m. after her shift, exhausted, looking forward to a quiet Friday evening. But something about the weather felt wrong. The air had that electric quality, that stillness before the violence. So she'd driven back to the dispatch center to help the only other dispatcher on duty.
Let's make sure that we got that road shut down. I don't want nobody driving in there blowing us up while we're in there. You ready, Sam? Where's my other guy? Right here. You ready to go, bud? Yep. Get your mask and everything?
Came in from the west, from Buckland, and had to come in the back roads. We couldn't get into town. Houses flattened, John Deere dealerships gone, all of the convenience stores are gone. I haven't been uptown. I don't know what it looks like. I came down to the elevator.
Two spotters sat in their vehicle on a dirt road, cameras pointed at the horizon. What they saw made them scream. A wall, nearly 2 miles wide, black as death, against the deepening twilight. The funnel stretched from the ground to the sky, a rotating pillar of destruction moving directly toward the small farming town ahead.
Well, we're kind of playing watch and wait for the development of severe weather across parts of south central to southwestern Kansas. Let's look outside the sky tracker. We've had quite a little bit of cloud cover, but some occasional sunshine, which has really helped warm us up. But as we look across western Kansas, we're going out to Garden City. Just some high, thin clouds, plenty of sunshine, really allowing temperatures to warm greatly.
Dave Freeman leaned into the camera, his voice urgent but controlled. The enhanced Fujita scale had just been implemented 3 months earlier. Tonight, he was watching something historic form on his radar. A perfect hook echo wrapped completely around itself. The velocity signatures were off the charts. He knew what was coming. He had minutes to convince people to take shelter. Lives depended on the next words out of his mouth.
Very large wedge tornado on the ground that's going to be almost due north of my location. I'm going to put it about 5 miles, Jay, about 5 miles, I'm guessing.
All right.
North, maybe 5 to 8 miles north of my location right now, Jay.
All right, Lanny, try getting the first cam fired up if you can. And now let's go over to Darren. Darren, what do you see from your vantage point?
Right now we're just about ready to get on to Highway 183 to go north towards Greensburg. We still have a large wedge tornado on the ground to our north with possible satellite tornadoes. Yeah, I just saw a lightning flash that still probably, I would say probably 5 miles to our north.
The sirens had been wailing for over 10 minutes now. Jeff Blackburn gathered his wife and daughter Cassie in the basement bathroom. The air pressure dropped so suddenly his ears popped. Then came the sound. Not a freight train, something worse. A screaming wind that seemed to have a voice, punctuated by the rhythmic pop, pop, pop of windows failing throughout the neighborhood. Cassie felt water on her back. The house above them was being lifted, boards stretching, creaking, pulling apart.
Now, as we look at the visible satellite picture, you will notice that, we started out overcast this morning, but look at all the sunshine across southwestern and now parts of south central Kansas. There's just some high, thin clouds starting to drift in now, and that's really warming up the atmosphere. Kate's Viper 3D, there are no thunderstorms occurring yet, but look at all the heat. 86 Medicine Lodge, 85 Dodge, 80 in Garden City. Now, the dew point, remember, this is the moisture in the air. Notice how we got a dry line between Great Bend and Dodge, Medicine Lodge to Pratt, right in here. And it's that dry line. We're going to keep an eye in that area to see if we can see some severe thunderstorms erupt.
The meteorologists watched their screens in horror as the tornado centered itself directly over Greensburg, 1.7 miles wide, moving at 20 miles per hour. The residence time over any single structure would be prolonged, catastrophic. They'd done everything right. 39-minute warning, tornado emergency declaration, multiple siren activations. Now all they could do was watch and pray that people had listened. At 9:45 p.m. on May 4th, 2007, the first EF5 tornado on the newly implemented enhanced Fujita scale struck Greensburg, Kansas. In 9 minutes, 95% of the town ceased to exist. But this is not just a story about destruction. This is a story about decisions made in darkness, about a warning system that saved hundreds of lives, and about a town that would rise from total devastation to become something the world had never seen before.
Literally within the hour after the tornado hit, I was met by a very dark city, a grain bin actually sitting in the middle of a city street. And I have to tell you, that was on the east side of town, the side of town that has the least amount of damage.
The morning of May 4th, 2007, dawned hot and humid across the central Great Plains. In Greensburg, a farming town of 1,400 souls in southwestern Kansas, residents went about their Friday routines. Farmers checked wheat fields. Kids finished up the school day. Nobody imagined that by midnight, their town would be gone.
It started to hail real hard. The wind just kept getting louder. And the landline rang, and it was our neighbor, and he said, look, Kelsey and the baby are at home. Can they come over and be in your basement? And in my mind, I thought it's too late, but I couldn't tell him no, so I said, yeah, but tell them to hurry and come to the back door. Hung up the phone, ran back up the steps. Back door's right at the top of the steps, went out, and they didn't show up. And I heard glass blow out on the south side of the house, so I turned around and started running down the steps. I'm 5 or 6 steps down, and drywall hits me in the head on the way down.
300 miles above the Rocky Mountains, a powerful jet stream carved through the upper atmosphere. Meteorologists call it a negatively tilted trough. The pattern was textbook severe weather. A deep low-pressure system sat over eastern Colorado, spinning counterclockwise, drawing moisture north from the Gulf of Mexico like a massive vacuum.
But we have an area in the atmosphere, a lid or a cap, if you will, that we've got to break through. Right now it's holding very strong. Hopefully it will hold strong. That will eliminate the severe thunderstorm threat, but we're kind of watching and waiting to see if that cap is going to erode. We'll have a complete forecast coming.
On the ground, an invisible battle line formed. To the west, bone-dry air from the desert southwest. To the east, air so saturated with moisture you could taste it. Dew points surged into the upper 60s and low 70s Fahrenheit. The energy in the atmosphere was explosive. Convective available potential energy values reached 4,500 to 5,500 joules per kilogram. For context, anything over 2,500 is considered extreme. Lead forecaster Jeff Johnson studied the computer models. Everything was lining up for a significant severe weather event. But there was something else. A cap. A layer of warm air aloft that was suppressing storm development, allowing the instability to build and build and build. When that cap broke, probably around sunset, the storms would explode with unusual violence.
Watching a very dangerous situation unfold across Kiowa County. We're keeping you updated during the commercial breaks on the rest of the network, but we are live continuous on KUPK Channel 13 for a tornado warning. Let's go over to Cake's Viper 3D. A very pronounced hook echo. Our chaser Lanny Dean reporting a very large tornado on the ground. This is about 12 miles southwest of Greensburg, and it is heading towards Greensburg. As we look at the velocity signatures, this is wind blowing away and towards the radar. This is about as strong as it gets, folks. Unfortunately, very powerful thunderstorm.
Bob Dixon, a postal worker who'd lived in Greensburg his entire life, finished his shift and headed home. The sky to the southwest looked ominous, but this was Kansas in May. Storms were part of life. He'd been through tornado warnings before. The town had good storm cellars. People knew what to do. What he didn't know was that he'd soon be elected mayor of a town that barely existed anymore.
Jay, it's Lanny. I've got a monster wedge tornado. I'm about 4 to 5 miles south of Greensburg. The tornado has crossed Highway 183. Definitely, it's to my northeast. Jay, this tornado is a very big tornado. At least at least 3/4 of a mile wide tornado on the ground right now.
The cap broke. Towering cumulus clouds punched through the warm layer, feeding on the unstable air below. Within minutes, a discrete supercell thunderstorm organized itself southwest of Dodge City. It had everything: massive rotation, rich inflow of moisture, and it was moving northeast, directly toward Greensburg.
Where's that second one at? Oh man, that's a beautiful tornado.
The supercell produced its first tornado in northwest Comanche County. Initially narrow, it began a process of rapid intensification. Over the next 42 minutes, it would cycle through multiple intensification phases, growing wider, stronger, more violent. Radar imagery from Dodge City showed the classic signature, a hook echo. The radar couldn't see the tornado itself, but it could see the rain and hail wrapping around the circulation, and the velocity data was terrifying.
All right, let's go further north. No, there's a I know, dude. I know, dude.
It's good now.
Okay,
Clear.
Here.
At 9:19 p.m., the National Weather Service in Dodge City issued a tornado warning for Kiowa County. The text specifically mentioned Greensburg. Estimated time of arrival, 9:45 p.m. This gave the town a 26-minute lead time, 26 minutes to make the difference between life and death for 1,400 people. The tornado's sirens began to wail across Greensburg. Usually, sirens sound once, a 3-minute alert, then silence. But tonight was different. The sirens kept going, stopping, starting again. Multiple activations. Emergency managers were sending a message. This is real. This is not a drill. Get underground now.
The only thing, this storm is very scary. In the worst case, I'm just going to waste a little bit of your time tonight if you go down to your shelters and it turns out not to be producing a tornado, but just what we're seeing here is a very scary signature. Annie, how close are you to the county line?
We have passed the county line already, Jay.
Okay, so you're north of the county line, and the tornado, from your vantage point, is to the east of US 183, correct?
Jay, very large tornado. Okay, I don't know who reported it which. We have 2 tornadoes on the ground, Jay. We have a small, a medium, if you will, to my northeast. We have a very large.
Megan Gardner heard the sirens and assumed it was another false alarm. Happens all the time in Kansas. You hear sirens. A tornado gets spotted out in a field somewhere. Then nothing. She waited for them to stop. But they didn't stop. 10 minutes passed. The sirens kept wailing. A knot formed in her stomach. This was different.
At this point, we are dealing with a massive evacuation and search and rescue operation here in Greensburg. It was a massive funnel cloud that ripped through this town, leveling more than half of it.
Dave Freeman had been tracking the storm for over an hour. His radar showed a massive wedge tornado on the ground. Storm chasers were sending him reports. 1.7 miles wide, moving directly at Greensburg. He looked into the camera. This was the moment. The words he chose in the next few minutes would determine whether people lived or died.
The one that's about to come down on us. I'm getting the tornado that's on the ground right now. Yeah. I got it, man. I got it. Turn off the light. Turn.
This is an extremely dangerous situation for Greensburg. We have a large, violent tornado on the ground moving northeast at 20 miles per hour. If you are in Greensburg, you need to be in your basement or storm shelter right now. This is not a drill. This tornado is massive. It is life-threatening. Take shelter immediately.
Is where the tornado would be located, and it has been on the ground for probably 25 minutes, maybe even longer.
Now, Darren, you said you were getting on US 183 and heading north. What cross street, how far north of the Kiowa-Comanche County line are you?
We're right on the line.
You're right on the line currently, and you're about to proceed northbound back behind the tornado.
That's correct.
And you've been watching this for quite a little while, and what did you estimate its maximum width was?
I would say easily a mile, and that's kind of being conservative.
The Dodge City Weather Office upgraded their warning to a tornado emergency. This enhanced wording is reserved for the worst of the worst, confirmed violent tornadoes moving into populated areas. The text was stark. A violent tornado was on a direct path for portions of Greensburg. This is an emergency situation for Greensburg.
All right, let's go back over to Cake's Viper 3D, and unfortunately the very scary radar signatures, they continue. We go over to the which way it's blowing mode in the radar, and still indicating just very strong rotation. Now the reports are that the tornado was on the east side of US 183, and this is putting it just to the south of Greensburg now. Only by about 3 miles or so is where we have the strongest circulation, and somewhere in the vicinity of that strong circulation, if there's a tornado on the ground, that's the location where it is going to be. This is from the National Weather Service in Dodge City. They have issued a tornado emergency. This is very rare.
Brad Stauner had been driving when hail the size of baseballs began pounding his windshield. The glass spider-webbed. He could barely see. He pulled into a gas station, ran inside. The clerk looked at him with wide eyes. "Storm's coming. We need to hide." They crammed into the walk-in cooler with several other people. The heavy metal door swung shut. In 3 minutes, the building above them would cease to exist. The cooler would save their lives.
At this point, we are dealing with a massive evacuation and search and rescue operation here in Greensburg. Of course, this being one of many Kansas towns hit by twisters last night. Residents here tell us it was a massive funnel cloud that ripped through this town and left more than half of it leveled. In fact, behind me, just about a quarter mile down the road, is where the tornado cut its path, and that is absolutely destroyed. Now, as for the search and rescue, at this point, we do not know how many people are injured or are missing or may have even died as a result of this storm. At daybreak, the Kansas Army National Guard will get here to Greensburg and assist in that search and rescue. Hopefully, everyone will be found and no one will have perished in this massive storm. For now, we're in Greensburg. I'm Josh Woodsman.
The phone lines lit up. Call after call. I can see it coming. It's huge. What do we do? Toshia and the other dispatcher worked frantically, trying to stay calm, giving instructions. Get underground. Basement. Center of the house. Away from windows. The radio traffic was constant. Emergency responders were scrambling to get into position, knowing that in minutes they'd be dealing with a disaster unlike anything they'd seen before.
Images forever etched in my mind. One of a dad holding his child, a baby about the same age as my son that's at home, hugging him, clutching onto him, his wife sitting beside him, just sobbing and crying. Other relatives running up, greeting their loved ones that they have been frantically searching for, while straight next to them, people calling on their cell phones, doing anything desperate to get a phone call out, desperate to find their family members. Those are all things, all moments, all emotions that no matter who you are, no matter what job you're doing, whether you're a police officer or even a reporter, they have to hit you on a personal level.
Randy Reed and his wife huddled in their basement, listening. The wind began to scream. Not roar, scream. Like something alive and furious. The pressure drop was so sudden, so extreme, it felt like the air was being sucked out of the house. Windows began popping. Pop, pop, pop. A rhythmic destruction marching through the neighborhood. Randy could hear the wind sucking the air out of the house above him. Then the grinding. The sound of their home being disassembled, board by board, nail by nail.
And we went and got in the bathtub, and I was frantic because I thought I'd left them there to die. I thought I'd left them there to die.
Pam Muntz had just finished dinner with her daughter and grandchildren. When the sirens started, she urged her daughter to take the kids to the basement. Before joining them, she made one more decision. Their Cocker Spaniel, Sarah, was recovering from surgery. The dog was in a wire kennel that served as her doghouse. No time to take it apart. No time to move it. Pam grabbed coats from the hallway, threw them over the kennel, then ran for the basement stairs.
Very strong rotation now about 12 miles southwest of Greensburg, and it's moving towards Greensburg and really doesn't show any signs of letting up. This circulation still very powerful in this thunderstorm right here. Let me give you a track on it as far as where it is in relation to the south edge of Greensburg. It's only about 10 miles to the southwest of Greensburg, and it is moving in your general direction.
The tornado crossed U.S. Highway 183 on the south side of town. Homes began to disintegrate. Not collapse, disintegrate. Walls turned to splinters. Roofs lifted and shattered into pieces. Hardwood trees that had stood for decades were debarked in seconds, stripped down to bare white wood. The vortex was so wide, so powerful, that it centered itself directly over the town. Greensburg wasn't clipped by the edge of the tornado. It was swallowed whole.
How difficult this situation was. I mean, there is no communication out here, and I know the folks back in Wichita know that very well, as we are without cell coverage for most of the time, and for law enforcement, that has been a very big problem.
The tornado crossed Kansas Avenue, Greensburg's Main Street. Every business, every shop, every storefront, gone. The hardware store where Scott had been closing up exploded around him. The roof peeled off like paper. He tried to wedge himself into a doorframe. The wind spun him like a toy. Debris became missiles. Glass, wood, metal. He covered his head with his arms, felt the sharp sting of lacerations opening across his skin, and waited to die.
Communications, they're just non-existent. It's just, it's impossible right at the moment.
What about missing persons? I mean, are you guys aware that there are some people missing and maybe trapped?
What they're trying to do now, and because of the communication, is very difficult. And what they have is they're going to the Dillon's parking lot, and they're trying to let people know, leave their name and, where they were at. And that way, basically word of mouth, we can kind of establish where everybody is and if everybody's been accounted for.
Mary Sweet, hospital administrator, had evacuated patients to the lower levels. But the tornado didn't care. It ripped the roof completely off the building. Walls collapsed inward. Rain and hail poured down on trapped patients and staff. In the darkness, with power gone and the structure compromised, the medical staff worked by flashlight and instinct, pulling people from rubble, trying to move them to safer areas of the wreckage.
Currently, right now, just to let you know my position, I am on 160 highway headed west, and I do have a very large funnel at this time, Jay. Very large funnel back towards the area of, tornado on the ground, Jay. Tornado on the ground, definite tornado on the ground. Near, I'm going to put it close to Sitka.
The bathroom door bowed inward from the pressure. Cassie Gamble felt the incredible wind and pressure bearing down on them. It wasn't the freight train sound everyone talks about. It was wind, crazy wind, screaming wind. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence. Jeff waited 30 seconds, a minute. Cautiously, he opened the bathroom door, walked up the basement stairs. At the top, there was nothing. No laundry room, no floor. The stairs just walked up to nothing. Open sky, the house was gone.
The damage as we got to downtown, unimaginable in the darkness. Then once dawn came, I have to tell you, a photographer and I were driving around town and utterly just sat in silence because there was nothing you can say. As we bring you these pictures and these stories of the people here, there's no words to describe, and the pictures can't do justice the amount of damage that is done to this town in Greensburg. Very fitting that people are just talking about wondering how to rebuild this early on, saying, I don't know how we can rebuild. One lady saying if we did rebuild, this town would be brand new.
The tornado exited the north side of Greensburg and continued into open farmland. It had been on the ground for 9 minutes inside the city limits. 9 minutes of violence, so complete, so total, that when survivors emerged from their shelters, they couldn't recognize their own neighborhood. Landmarks were gone. Trees were gone. The visual references that allow humans to navigate their world had been erased. Randy Reed climbed the basement stairs and found his house still standing, severely damaged, but standing. He walked outside. His house was the only one left on the block. Every other home was a pile of debris. He walked through what used to be his neighborhood in shock, the surreal randomness of tornado damage. Why did his house survive when his neighbors didn't? It made no sense. The turbulent eddies within a tornado's circulation are chaotic, violent, unpredictable. Debris began hitting the dispatch center. The back metal door, the bulletproof windows. They held. But Toshia knew they needed to go deeper. She and the other dispatcher abandoned their stations and ran for the basement. The building shook, groaned, but it held. When they emerged minutes later, the town outside was unrecognizable. Darkness, rain, and an eerie silence broken only by car alarms and the beeping of battery-powered smoke detectors under piles of rubble. Scott lay in the wreckage of his store, covered in blood and glass, certain he would die there. Then headlights. A family from California. They'd stopped in Greensburg for a graduation ceremony. Strangers thrust into the role of first responders. They pulled Scott from the debris, got him into their vehicle, and drove him toward help. The randomness of survival, the kindness of strangers. In disaster, people become the best version of themselves, or the worst, mostly the best. Bob Dixon walked through the darkness with a flashlight. As a postal worker, he knew every street, every address. But he couldn't find the streets. The houses that defined the addresses were gone. He'd lived in Greensburg his entire life. 61 years. Every memory he had was tied to this place. The church where he'd been married. The school his kids attended. The main street shops where he'd bought groceries for decades. All of it gone. Emergency vehicles began arriving from surrounding counties. Firefighters, paramedics, law enforcement. They'd trained for disasters. But this, 95% destruction. How do you even begin? Where do you start? The National Guard was mobilized. A full evacuation order was issued. The town was judged unsafe. Everyone out. Now. When Pam Muntz finally climbed the stairs from the basement, she found the upper level of her home destroyed, but in the wreckage, something impossible, the wire kennel, still upright. Sarah, their Cocker Spaniel, alive inside. The coats Pam had thrown over the kennel had protected the dog from flying glass and debris. Before the tornado, Sarah had been quiet, never barking or whining. After that night, she would alert the family to every storm, every cloud, every shift in the wind. As dawn broke over Greensburg, the final death toll emerged. 11 people had died in the town, 63 injured. In a population of 1,400, those were devastating numbers. But they were also miraculous. If the same tornado had struck in 1955 with no warning system, the death toll could have exceeded 200. President George W. Bush declared Kiowa County a federal disaster area. FEMA, the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the National Guard. Federal resources began flowing into the devastated community. But everyone knew. The real question wasn't whether Greensburg could be rebuilt. The question was whether anyone would choose to rebuild it at all. By Sunday morning, Greensburg was a ghost town. Every resident evacuated. The National Guard set up checkpoints on all roads leading into the city. Too dangerous. Debris everywhere. Gas leaks. Downed power lines. Unstable structures ready to collapse. Even survivors weren't allowed back in. They'd have to wait until Monday to see what was left of their homes. Sarah Newsom and her family were given a brief window Sunday afternoon. A National Guardsman let them through. They brought a trailer, hoping to salvage something, anything. When Sarah saw her house for the first time, she couldn't process it. The roof was in the front yard. Walls had collapsed. Her stuffed animal collection, her childhood memories, buried somewhere in the debris pile. Seeing the house for the first time is super hard. She'd recall years later, it just doesn't look the same anymore. Greensburg's claim to fame was the Big Well, the world's largest hand-dug well, 109 feet deep, dug in 1887. It had survived every storm for 120 years. The well itself was intact, but the water tower above it was destroyed. The gift shop, gone. The museum building that told Greensburg's history, obliterated. Even the town's most famous landmark had been wounded. Engineers began assessing the scope of cleanup. 800,000 cubic yards of debris, 961 homes and businesses completely destroyed, 216 with major damage, 307 with minor damage. The math was stark. Out of roughly 1,500 structures in Greensburg, only a few dozen were inhabitable. The rest would have to be demolished. Meteorologist and engineer Tim Marshall arrived to conduct the official damage survey. He'd been studying tornadoes since he was 9 years old when a twister hit his Illinois hometown. He'd surveyed dozens of violent tornadoes. But Greensburg was different. The damage was EF5, no question, but it was the extent that was remarkable. Not just isolated EF5 damage. Nearly the entire town was EF3 or higher. Marshall's team made it official. The Greensburg tornado was rated EF5, estimated winds of 205 miles per hour. The designation was based on specific damage indicators. 7 homes swept completely from their foundations, well-anchored frame homes reduced to splinters, hardwood trees debarked, soil scoured from the ground. This wasn't just a strong tornado, it was a historic one. The first EF5 on the enhanced Fujita scale, which had been implemented just 3 months earlier on February 1st. Survivors gathered at a high school gymnasium in Haviland, 10 miles away. City officials, community leaders, residents who'd lost everything. The question hung in the air: do we rebuild, or do we let Greensburg die? Many rural Kansas towns were already dying. Slow hemorrhage of young people to cities, schools closing, businesses shuttering. The tornado had just accelerated what was already happening. Stacy Barnes, city administrator, stood up, young, energized. He'd seen something in the devastation that others hadn't. An opportunity. We were already on a downhill slide before the tornado, he said. We can rebuild what we had, or we can rebuild something better, something the world has never seen. We can become the greenest town in rural America. The room erupted. Half the people loved it. A vision, a purpose, a reason for Greensburg to exist in the 21st century. The other half thought it was insane. Green building? LEED certification? Wind turbines? This was western Kansas, a conservative farming community. People drove diesel trucks and worked the land. What did they know about sustainability? And who would pay for it? Kansas Governor Kathleen Sebelius toured the devastation and publicly challenged Greensburg to become the greenest town in rural America. The political support was crucial. State resources, federal grants, private donations. The Green Vision gave Greensburg something it desperately needed: a story. The media descended. CNN, National Geographic, international news outlets. Greensburg became a symbol. Rather than rushing to rebuild, city leaders made a crucial decision. Pause. Take time to plan. A team of architects, engineers, urban planners, and sustainability experts was assembled. They'd create a sustainable, comprehensive master plan. Every decision about the town's future would be guided by this plan. It was an unprecedented approach for a small rural community. In December 2007, the Greensburg City Council passed a resolution that stunned the architecture world. All city-owned buildings over 4,000 square feet would be required to achieve LEED Platinum certification. Not LEED certified, not silver, not gold, platinum, the highest possible rating. No other municipality in America had ever mandated this level of sustainability for public buildings. But while architects designed eco-friendly buildings, Greensburg was bleeding people. By the 2010 census, the population had dropped from 1,574 to 777. Nearly half the town was gone. Young families, renters, people without the capital or insurance to rebuild. They left for Dodge City, Wichita, anywhere with jobs and affordable housing. The demographic shift was brutal. The first residents who tried to rebuild hit a financial wall. Building a modern, energy-efficient, tornado-resistant home cost over $200 per square foot. A modest family home, $250,000 minimum. But the market value in rural Kiowa County? Maybe $125,000. Banks wouldn't lend more than the appraised value. Insurance payouts based on old housing stock were insufficient. The appraisal gap trapped people. They couldn't afford to rebuild. They couldn't afford to stay. The first major building completed was the 5.47 Arts Center, named for the date of the tornado, May 4th, 2007. Built by students from 12 colleges and universities, it achieved LEED Platinum certification, solar panels, wind turbines, passive solar design, an energy use intensity of 13.6 thousand BTUs per square foot per year, 70% more efficient than a typical arts center. It was proof the vision could work. President Bush returned to Greensburg for a second visit, this time to address the high school graduation. 12 seniors, the smallest graduating class in school history. Most of their families had moved away, but these 12 had stayed or returned. Bush praised their resilience. The event was broadcast nationally. Greensburg was becoming a symbol of American determination, but symbols don't pay mortgages. The decision to consolidate into a single K-12 school was controversial, but it made financial sense. The new Kiowa County schools would be a showcase of sustainable design, geothermal heating and cooling, a ground source heat pump system using the stable temperature of the earth, natural daylighting to reduce electricity use, a wind turbine on school grounds to provide power and serve as an educational tool. It would become one of the most advanced school buildings in America. A business incubator was built to attract green industry to Greensburg. The vision was clear. If Greensburg could become a hub for renewable energy research and green manufacturing, it could reverse the population decline. Young people would return. Jobs would follow. The building was LEED Platinum, but filling it with tenants proved harder than building it. The BTI John Deere dealership rebuilt as a LEED Platinum facility. The owners saw the marketing value. First LEED Platinum dealership in their franchise. Energy savings of 55% compared to a conventional building. They used waste oil from equipment servicing to heat the building. A wind turbine on-site generated power. It proved that green building wasn't just for public buildings or nonprofits. It could work for private business too. The most audacious private residence was the silo home, a cylindrical structure designed to deflect tornado winds, 10-inch thick concrete walls. A design inspired by grain silos, which routinely survive tornadoes that destroy everything around them. Architect magazine featured it. Eco-tourists from Europe began visiting Greensburg specifically to see sustainable building innovations. The town was becoming a pilgrimage site for green architecture. Rebuilding the hospital was non-negotiable. A town without health care cannot retain retirees or attract families with children. But building a critical access hospital to LEED Platinum standards was expensive, incredibly expensive. State and federal funds were secured. The new Kiowa County Memorial Hospital would incorporate rainwater harvesting, extensive daylighting, and a highly insulated building envelope. It would become the first critical access hospital in America to achieve LEED Platinum certification. Southwest of town, 10 massive wind turbines rose from the prairie. The Greensburg Wind Farm. Each turbine rated at 1.2 to 5 megawatts. Total capacity, 12.5 megawatts. Greensburg's peak electrical load was only 3 to 4 megawatts. The town would produce 3 times more electricity than it consumed. The excess would be sold to the regional power grid. Greensburg was now a net energy producer. Greensburg became the first municipality in America to convert all streetlights to LED fixtures. 70% reduction in lighting energy consumption. The LEDs also reduced light pollution, allowing residents to see the Milky Way for the first time in years. Small win, but symbolic. Every detail mattered. The 2010 census was a gut punch. Population, 777. Down from 1574 in 2000. The green buildings were beautiful. Energy bills were low. But people still needed jobs. Affordable housing. A reason to stay. The tension between the high-concept architectural vision and the economic reality of rural decline was undeniable. Developers refused to build speculative housing. The appraisal gap made every house a guaranteed financial loss. Employers wouldn't move to Greensburg because there was no workforce housing. Workers wouldn't move because there were no employers. The chicken and egg problem paralyzed residential development. Vacant lots sat empty. Weeds grew where homes once stood. The patchwork appearance contradicted the vision of a reborn green utopia. On the 10th anniversary of the tornado, survivors gathered at the Big Well Museum. The building had been completely rebuilt. It now housed exhibits about the tornado, the warning system, and the green rebuilding. Video of Dave Freeman's broadcast played on a loop. Bob Dixon, now former mayor, spoke to the crowd. "We've built a lot here, not just physically, but as a community." Stacy Barnes, who'd first proposed the green vision, was now tourism director. The ecotourism traffic had exceeded expectations. Hundreds of visitors from Europe, Asia, Australia, architects studying sustainable design, students writing dissertations, researchers documenting the recovery. But most visitors stayed a few hours, took photos, and left. They didn't move in. They didn't create jobs. Tourism couldn't sustain a town. Tim Morton had been 14 when the tornado hit. He'd heard his house being lifted up, things being pulled apart, boards stretching and creaking. After high school, he left for college. Everyone assumed he'd never come back. But he did. "It's home," he said. "There's not really any place like home, I guess." Young people returning was rare, but it happened. Just not often enough. By 2020, the population had stabilized around 740. The exodus had stopped. But the growth everyone hoped for never materialized. The town was older. The median age was now 49.6 years, 13 years older than the national median. Greensburg was becoming a retirement community. Walkable, energy efficient, low utility bills, attractive to seniors, not attractive to young families. The psychological scars ran deep. Approximately 13 to 14% of survivors met clinical criteria for PTSD years after the event. Lelopsophobia, the pathological fear of tornadoes and severe weather. Every spring, when the sky darkened, some survivors experienced panic attacks. Farrell Allison, a decade after the storm, described the sensation. "I just had this knot in my stomach, the sound of a siren, the smell of rain." Triggers that instantly transported them back to May 4th, 2007. Pastor Jeff Blackburn, who'd survived in the basement bathroom with his wife and daughter, wrote a book about the experience. He didn't focus on the architecture or the green buildings. He focused on faith, community, the spiritual journey of losing everything and finding meaning in the rebuilding. His daughter Cassie, who'd been in high school during the storm, now worked for the town's media center. She'd married, put down roots. The community that raised her had survived. So would she. Sue Greenleaf Taylor, Economic Development Director, was blunt in interviews. Prior to the storm, we were a small Kansas community, struggling to maintain and grow. Now we are a small Kansas community which had a tornado struggling to maintain and grow. The green buildings hadn't reversed the macroeconomic forces depopulating rural America. Young people still left for opportunities in cities. The birth rate was below replacement. Schools struggled to maintain enrollment. Main Street had partially recovered. A new grocery store, a few restaurants, the BTI John Deere dealership, a gas station, a hotel, but many lots remained vacant. The commercial density of pre-tornado Greensburg was gone. 110 businesses had been damaged beyond repair in the tornado. Only a fraction had reopened. Some business owners had moved on. Others had retired. Some had died. The latest population estimate put Greensburg at 703 residents, less than half the pre-tornado number. The Green Vision had saved the town from complete abandonment. Without the media attention, the federal funding, the global interest, Greensburg likely would have become a ghost town like Peacher, Oklahoma, but it hadn't created the thriving, sustainable city some had envisioned. The beautiful LEED Platinum Hospital faced chronic staffing shortages. Recruiting doctors and nurses to rural western Kansas was difficult before the tornado. After, even harder. The hospital remained open. Critical access designation meant federal support. But every year was a financial struggle. Healthcare in rural America was collapsing. Greensburg was no exception. Kiowa County schools serve fewer than 250 students K through 12. The state-of-the-art building was designed for capacity the town would likely never reach again. But the quality of education was high, small class sizes, personalized attention. Students learned about renewable energy in a building that embodied it. The wind turbine on school grounds was a teaching tool. Practical, real world. The sophisticated building management systems required specialized knowledge. Geothermal systems, solar panel arrays, energy recovery ventilators, automated lighting controls. In urban areas, finding technicians is easy. In rural Kansas, challenging and expensive. While energy bills were lower, maintenance costs for complex systems sometimes offset the savings. Nobody had factored this into the original plan. The recovery had exposed class divisions. A segment of the population, often called the Bar H Tavern crowd in sociological studies, felt alienated by the green focus. They viewed the LEED mandates and the influx of experts as a utopian vision imposed upon a working-class conservative community. Millions flowed into high-concept public buildings while they struggled to finance basic home repairs. This friction created resentment that took years to heal. By 2015, the friction had evolved into pragmatic acceptance. The wind turbines were just part of the horizon. The low utility bills were welcomed, even by skeptics. The ideological battles faded. People focused on survival, paying bills, keeping businesses open, retaining young families. The green buildings were fine, but they weren't solving the core problem: rural depopulation. Bob Dixon served as mayor from 2008 to 2016. 8 years navigating the impossible tension between architectural ambition and economic reality. He traveled to Alabama, Mississippi, Colorado, Canada, speaking to communities trying to recover from disasters. His message was consistent. After disaster, nothing is ever going to be like it was before. The next question you have to ask is, do we want it like it was before? The comparison to Udall, Kansas, was inescapable. In 1955, an F5 tornado struck Udall at night. No warning system, the siren didn't sound. 77 people died out of 500 residents, a 15% mortality rate. If Greensburg had suffered the same rate, over 225 people would have died. The warning system, the 26-minute lead time, the tornado emergency declaration saved hundreds of lives. That was the first miracle. Dave Freeman was named Broadcaster of the Year by the National Weather Association for his coverage of the Greensburg tornado, his second time winning the award. One survivor told him directly, "Your coverage saved my life." Multiple families credited his urgent warnings for their decision to seek shelter. Meteorologists study wind speed and radar. But Freeman understood something deeper: communication, trust, urgency, the right words at the right time. The Greensburg tornado became a case study in warning system effectiveness. 39-minute lead time from initial tornado warning to impact, multiple siren activations, tornado emergency declaration, television coverage, social media alerts. The integrated system worked. Future warning protocols incorporated lessons from Greensburg. The enhanced Fujita scale, just 3 months old when the tornado struck, received its first EF5 validation. Delegations from around the world visited Greensburg to study disaster recovery and sustainable design. Architects, urban planners, government officials, the 5.47 Arts Center, the school, the hospital. These weren't theoretical green buildings. They were functional, in use, proving that LEED Platinum was achievable even in rural settings with limited budgets. The influence extended far beyond Kansas. The one unequivocal success was renewable energy. The wind farm produced 3 times the electricity Greensburg consumed. The excess was sold to the regional grid, generating revenue. LED streetlights reduced municipal energy costs by 70%. Solar panels on public buildings further reduced demand. Greensburg was not just carbon neutral, it was carbon negative, a net energy producer. That achievement was real, measurable, and lasting. Researchers studying Greensburg identified a powerful force: place attachment, the deep, emotional connection to a geographic location. Even when their houses were gone, people wanted to return to Greensburg. Not to the building, to the place, the landscape, the community, the shared history. This attachment was the reason anyone stayed at all. You can't rebuild place attachment. It exists or it doesn't. As climate change accelerated extreme weather events, Greensburg became increasingly relevant as a case study. How do communities adapt to increased tornado risk? How do you rebuild after catastrophic destruction? The Greensburg model offered answers. Build stronger, build more efficiently, build with resilience from day one. The lessons applied to hurricane recovery on the Gulf Coast, wildfire rebuilding in California, flood recovery in the Midwest. The total federal investment in Greensburg's recovery exceeded $300 million. FEMA grants, HUD funding, USDA rural development loans, Department of Energy renewable energy grants, EPA brownfield cleanup. Without this massive public investment, the green rebuilding would have been impossible. Critics pointed to this fact. Greensburg wasn't replicable without extraordinary federal support. Fair criticism, but also irrelevant. The support existed because Greensburg created a vision worth supporting. The private sector never materialized as hoped. The business incubator struggled with occupancy. The green manufacturing hub didn't happen. Developers wouldn't build housing. The appraisal gap made residential development financially untenable. Private capital follows profit. In rural Kiowa County, the profit margin was too thin. This was the core limitation. Beautiful buildings, but not enough economic activity to sustain population growth. As of 2025, Greensburg stands as a paradox, physically futuristic, demographically fragile. The population hovers around 700. The LEED platinum buildings function as designed. The wind farm spins. The LED streetlights glow. But the grocery store struggles to stay open. The school enrollment declines. Young families leave for opportunities elsewhere. The green experiment was neither total success nor complete failure. It was survival. On the enhanced Fujita scale, EF5 is the highest rating. Winds over 200 miles per hour. Total destruction. The Greensburg tornado achieved this distinction 3 months after the scale was implemented. It would not be the last EF5, but it was the first, and its impact extended far beyond meteorological classification. The most important legacy is the simplest. 11 deaths. Tragic, but in context, miraculous. Without the warning system, the death toll could have exceeded 200. Every person who took shelter because of the sirens, because of Dave Freeman's broadcast, because of the tornado emergency declaration, lived. The integrated warning system worked. This success informed future protocols. It validated decades of investment in Doppler radar, spotter networks, and emergency communications. Greensburg could have become a ghost town. The path of least resistance after total destruction is abandonment. Residents could have taken their insurance checks and moved to Dodge City or Wichita. The town could have died quietly, another casualty of rural decline. But they chose differently. That choice, made in the darkest moments, defined everything that followed. The green buildings are beautiful, energy efficient, tornado resistant, but they didn't solve the core problem: rural depopulation. The macroeconomic forces emptying small towns across America don't stop because you have LEED Platinum certification. Jobs create communities. Communities create demand for housing. Housing follows employment. Greensburg built amazing buildings, but it couldn't create the economic foundation to fill them with people. Resilience isn't bouncing back to what was. It's adapting to new reality. Greensburg didn't rebuild a 1950s farming town. It couldn't. That world was gone. Instead, it built something new, smaller, older, more sustainable. Whether that constitutes success depends on how you define success. The town exists. People live there. Life continues. By that measure, Greensburg won. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events. More tornadoes, stronger hurricanes, deeper floods, more intense wildfires. Communities worldwide will face the question Greensburg faced. Do we rebuild? How do we rebuild? The Greensburg model offers one answer: build for the future, not the past. Incorporate resilience from day one. Use renewable energy. Design for adaptation. The lessons scale. The statistics fade. The meteorological data becomes historical footnote. But the stories endure. Pastor Jeff Blackburn climbing stairs to nowhere. Toshia Hoover watching the storm approach on radar. Pam Muntz's dog, Sarah, protected by coats thrown over a kennel. Randy Reed standing in his damaged house, the only one on the block still standing. These stories remind us that disasters don't happen to communities. They happen to people. Why did anyone stay? Economically, it made no sense. Emotionally, it was the only choice. Place attachment is the invisible force that holds communities together. The land, the sky, the horizon, the people. the shared memory of every spring storm, every harvest, every high school football game, every Sunday service. You can't rebuild that. But if it exists, it's powerful enough to bring people back to a town that barely exists anymore. Greensburg proves that disaster recovery at scale requires federal resources. Local and state resources are insufficient after catastrophic destruction. FEMA, HUD, USDA, EPA, DOE, the alphabet soup of federal agencies, the grants, the loans, the technical assistance. Without this support, most of Greensburg would still be vacant lots. This raises policy questions. How much federal support should flow to small towns? Is it cost-effective? What's the return on investment? No easy answers. But Greensburg makes the case that support matters. The rebuilt Kiowa County Schools is a living laboratory. Students learn about renewable energy while sitting in a building powered by geothermal and wind. They see their electric meters run backwards when solar panels generate excess power. They understand sustainability not as abstract concept, but as lived experience. This educational value compounds over decades. Students carry these lessons into adulthood. Some leave, but they take Greensburg's innovations with them. Ecotourism wasn't the economic engine some hoped, but it contributes. The Big Well Museum attracts thousands of visitors annually. Architecture students, sustainability researchers, disaster recovery planners, climate scientists. They spend money. They stay in hotels. They eat in restaurants. It's not manufacturing jobs, but it's something. In rural economies struggling to survive, something matters. The lasting psychological trauma exposed a gap. Disaster recovery focuses on buildings and infrastructure, but mental health infrastructure is equally critical. Lapsophobia, PTSD, chronic anxiety. These conditions require ongoing support, counseling, therapy, psychiatric care. Rural communities lack these resources. Greensburg highlighted this need. The lesson applies to every disaster. Rebuild the buildings, but also support the minds. Bob Dixon, who served as mayor through the hardest years, traveled to Pilger, Nebraska after an EF5 tornado destroyed that town in 2014. His message was simple but profound. I just want them to understand this isn't going to happen in 2 or 3 years. We're 8 years out, and we're continuing to heal and recover and grow. Disaster recovery isn't measured in months. It's measured in decades. Expecting rapid recovery sets communities up for disappointment and trauma. The appraisal gap between construction cost and market value was the single biggest barrier to housing recovery. This lesson applies everywhere. In disaster zones, insurance payouts reflect pre-disaster value. Rebuilding to modern code costs more. Banks won't lend more than appraised value. Families get trapped. Policymakers need solutions. Bridging loans, gap insurance, subsidized construction. Without addressing this, housing recovery stalls. Greensburg learned this the hard way. 18 years after the tornado, Greensburg stands as testament to human determination and the limits of that determination. The green buildings are real. The renewable energy success is real. The warning system validation is real, the lives saved are real, but the population loss is also real. The economic struggle is real, the vacant lots are real. Greensburg survived, but survival isn't the same as thriving. It's a town that refused to die. And sometimes, in rural America, that's victory enough. Dave Freeman retired from broadcasting in 2017 and moved to Israel for faith-based service. But his Greensburg broadcast lives on. In the Big Well Museum, his radar imagery and audio play on loop. Visitors hear his calm but urgent voice. If you are in Greensburg, you need to be in your basement or storm shelter right now. Those words saved lives. The lesson is clear. In disaster, communication matters as much as detection. You can have perfect radar, perfect forecasts, but if people don't act, they die. Freeman made them act. One unexpected benefit of LED streetlights: they reduced light pollution. For the first time in decades, Greensburg residents could see the Milky Way from their backyards. The night sky returned. Stars that had been washed out by sodium vapor lamps became visible again. A small thing, but profound. The violence of May 4th, 2007 had stripped away so much, but it also stripped away some things worth losing. The new Greensburg saw more, felt more, lived more intentionally. For residents under 18, the tornado is history. They weren't born yet, or they were too young to remember. They attend school in the LEED Platinum building. They take for granted the wind turbines on the horizon. They don't remember when Main Street was lined with businesses. This generational shift changes the narrative. The younger generation doesn't mourn what was lost. They build on what remains. Different perspective. Same challenge. Cassie Gamble was in high school when she survived the tornado in a basement bathroom with her father. She went to college. Everyone assumed she'd leave forever, but she came back, married, worked for the town's media center, had children in Greensburg. Her decision wasn't economic, it was identity. It's home, she said, not past tense, present tense. Home is, not was. For people like Cassie, the storm didn't sever the bond. It strengthened it. Every spring, when storm systems roll across Kansas, Greensburg survivors feel it. The darkening sky, the smell of rain, the sound of wind, triggers. Some people leave town during storm season, drive to Wichita and stay with relatives. They can't handle it. Others force themselves to face it, stand outside and watch the clouds, confronting fear. The trauma isn't optional, but the response is: some flee, some fight. Both are valid. The vacant lots where homes once stood have become informal memorials. Some families planted trees, others left foundations exposed. A few placed markers with street addresses that no longer exist. These empty spaces tell stories more powerful than any plaque. They're the negative space, the absence, the reminder that this town is smaller now, quieter, forever changed. The wind farm generates revenue, lease payments to landowners, taxes to the county, jobs and maintenance. It's not manufacturing, but it's stable. Wind doesn't leave for cheaper labor markets. The turbines will spin for 25 years minimum, then be replaced. Renewable energy might not revive rural America, but it can stabilize communities. Greensburg proved that. The Kansas National Guard's response in the first 72 hours prevented greater loss of life. Search and rescue, medical triage, communications, security, crowd control, debris removal. Without military-level logistics and personnel, the chaos would have been unmanageable. The Guard's role validated the importance of state-level emergency response capacity. Some states have cut National Guard funding. Greensburg makes the case for maintaining readiness. Insurance payouts were often insufficient. Policies based on replacement cost didn't account for modern building codes requiring higher standards. Some families fought for years to get full payouts. Others gave up. The insurance industry learned little from Greensburg. The same problems occur after every major disaster: underinsurance, claim denials, lengthy adjudication. Systemic reform is needed. It hasn't happened. Claude Hopkins, Larry Hoskins, Evelyn Kelly, David Lyon, Colleen Panzer, Ron Rediger, Harold Schmidt, Sarah Tackett, Beverly Voles, Richard Fry, Robert Tim Buckman, Max McCollum. 12 names on the memorial plaque at the Bigwell Museum. 12 people who didn't make it to shelter in time. 12 families forever changed. The number matters because it could have been 200. But each individual death was absolute for those who loved them. Many survivors credited NOAA weather radio for their survival. The automated warnings, the specific language, the urgency. In rural areas without reliable cell service or cable television, weather radio was the lifeline. Simple technology, cheap, effective. The lesson: high-tech solutions are great, but simple, reliable, low-cost technology saves lives. Every household in tornado-prone regions should have a weather radio, period. Donations poured in from across America. Millions of dollars, thousands of volunteers, church groups, labor unions, college students on spring break, Habitat for Humanity, Mennonite Disaster Service. Americans rally in crisis. The response was overwhelming, but coordination was challenging. Too many volunteers showed up with no housing or organization. Too many donations of unusable items. Future disaster response requires better coordination infrastructure. Survivors consistently said the tornado didn't sound like a freight train. It sounded like screaming wind, crazy wind. The freight train comparison is so common that people expect it. But real tornadoes sound different depending on proximity, intensity, and structure. The lesson: don't wait for a specific sound. If sirens sound, if warnings issued, take shelter. Don't wait to hear it. By then, it's too late. The survival rate for people in basements or proper shelters was nearly 100%. The 11 deaths occurred primarily among people caught above ground or in inadequate shelter. The message is stark. Basements work. Storm shelters work. Closets don't. Bathtubs don't. Get underground. Get to the lowest level of the strongest building. Listen to warnings. Take action. Greensburg proved these principles with lives. The atmospheric conditions on May 4th were near perfect for violent tornadoes. Extreme Cape values, strong wind shear, rich moisture, late-day storm initiation when instability peaked. Forecasters recognized the setup. They issued watches hours in advance. The system worked from atmospheric science to public warning. This validation reinforced confidence in forecast models and communication protocols. National media coverage brought attention and resources, but it also created pressure. Greensburg became a symbol, the green town. Expectations were impossibly high. When population didn't rebound, some media framed it as failure. The pressure to perform, to justify the investment, to prove the concept, added stress to survivors already traumatized. Media attention is powerful, but it cuts both ways. Churches provided critical emotional and spiritual support. Pastor Jeff Blackburn's ministry didn't focus on buildings. It focused on souls, grief counseling, memorial services, community gatherings. In rural Kansas, church isn't just religion, it's social fabric. The faith community held Greensburg together when logic suggested letting go. This role is often undervalued in disaster recovery analysis. It shouldn't be. Greensburg is becoming an age-in-place community, median age 49.6 years and rising, the walkable downtown, low utility bills, quality health care, quiet streets. These appeal to retirees. Young families can't afford it, so the town grays. This isn't failure, it's adaptation, but it raises questions about long-term sustainability. Who will care for aging residents when the next generation isn't there? Greensburg required sustained political will. Governor Sebelius's challenge. Federal agency coordination. City Council's lead mandate. State legislation supporting recovery. Without political leadership, the green vision doesn't happen. Communities can't do it alone. This lesson applies to climate adaptation. Individual action isn't enough. Institutional change requires political will. Greensburg had it. Most places don't. The decision to pause after the disaster and create a comprehensive plan was the wisest choice Greensburg made. Most communities rushed to rebuild, get back to normal as fast as possible. Greensburg took 6 months to plan. That delay allowed for better design, coordinated infrastructure, unified vision. The temporary inconvenience of delay created permanent improvement. Patience in disaster recovery is difficult, but essential. Every survivor has a story: where they were, how they survived, what they lost. Collectively, these stories form the narrative of May 4th, 2007. No single story captures the whole, but together they create a tapestry of human experience: fear, loss, resilience, grief, hope, adaptation, survival, the power of oral history, the importance of listening, the value of documentation. In 2007, smartphones were rare. Social media was new. Warning dissemination has evolved dramatically. Today, wireless emergency alerts push tornado warnings directly to phones. Location-specific, instantaneous. Greensburg helped prove the value of multi-channel warning systems. But technology has accelerated. Future disasters will have even better communication tools. If people use them, building green cost more upfront, but operational costs were lower. Energy savings, reduced maintenance on efficient systems. The payback period varied by building. Some achieved return on investment in 10 years, others longer. The green premium is real, but so are the benefits. The analysis isn't simple. Economics depend on energy prices, technology costs, and time horizon considered. Greensburg is one town, but its story reflects broader trends: rural depopulation, aging demographics, economic consolidation, farm mechanization, reducing labor needs, young people leaving for opportunity. These forces predated the tornado and continue today. Greensburg's green experiment was an attempt to reverse these trends. It slowed the decline, but it didn't reverse it. The broader context matters. No single town can defy national trends. Was the Greensburg tornado caused by climate change? Scientists are cautious about attributing individual events. Climate change increases atmospheric energy. Warmer air holds more moisture. This creates conditions more favorable for severe weather. But tornadoes also occurred before industrial warming. The attribution question is complex. What's clear? More disasters are coming. Communities need to prepare. Greensburg shows how, and how hard it is. Pam Muntz grabbed coats from the hallway and threw them over her dog Sarah's kennel before running to the basement. That split-second decision saved the dog's life. Flying glass and debris that should have killed Sarah was stopped by fabric, randomness, chaos, and a moment of quick thinking under pressure. Small decisions in disaster cascade into big outcomes. This story reminds us that survival often hinges on tiny actions taken in terror. Greensburg's Main Street was called the Yellow Brick Road by some locals. Brick buildings, brick storefronts, a century of commercial history. The tornado ground it to dust in seconds. The new downtown is functional, but it's not the Yellow Brick Road. Some things can't be rebuilt, only mourned. The lost architecture, the lost businesses, the lost sense of history embedded in old buildings, gone. This loss is rarely quantified but deeply felt. Why did I survive when my neighbor died? Why did my house stand when others disintegrated? Survivor guilt is real and painful. Randy Reed walked through his surviving house surrounded by total destruction. The randomness felt wrong, undeserved. This guilt compounds trauma, requires therapy, community support, understanding that survival isn't earned. It's chance, chaos. The tornado doesn't choose. It destroys randomly. Survivors carry this burden. Ray Stegman became emergency manager for Kiowa County in January 2007. 4 months later, the worst disaster in county history. He had no emergency operations plan, not NIMS compliant, minimal training. But he rose to the challenge. Years later, listening to archived radio traffic from that night, he said, "It's just amazing going back and listening to that whole duration of radio traffic that you forget over time hearing. The trauma embedded in voice recordings, the decisions made under pressure. The learning curve was brutal, but lessons were learned." Today, the Big Well Museum stands rebuilt, a circular modern structure replacing the destroyed gift shop. Inside, exhibits tell Greensburg's story, meteorological data, survivor accounts, video of the tornado, Dave Freeman's forecast, photos of destruction, models of green buildings. It's a shrine, a memorial, an educational center. Visitors stand at the edge of the 109-foot deep well and look down into darkness. The well survived. It always survives. Storms pass. The well remains. Perhaps that's the metaphor Greensburg needs.